I almost didn't make this channel. I wrote half a page for my first script and then gave up. Nobody cares what I have to say. I'm not especially smart or talented. It's no use. I had this need to create, but I hated myself too much to let that happen. I gave up, and it bothered me, but what could I do? The video that I was working on was no good. One night, I was getting dinner with a friend. I finally had the bravery to tell him about this YouTube channel idea that I had, but I couldn't follow through on it. He loved the idea. We excitedly ran through ideas that night for the channel. I showed him some of the videos that inspired me to create. We talked late into the night about possibilities for the channel. I was going to write and record the videos and he would edit. The only problem was that this friend had a history of flaking on me for our creative projects. I needed him though, so I decided to trust him once again. My initial idea for this channel was a structured video essay style follow-up to my podcast, Swine Before Pearls, where my friend Joel and I would talk about the greatest works of art of all time, be they books, movies, or albums. We started it back in 2021. I found the research process really enjoyable. I worked really hard to know as much as I could about any piece of art we talked about before going on to the show. Joel worked really hard on the show too. For the first few episodes at least. He quickly stopped taking the show seriously, which did admittedly make it funny, but it also caused some tension between us.
I'm gonna hire an assassin, and Joel's brains are gonna get blown out.
I still had this burning passion to create. The podcast could only satisfy me so much, especially since Joel didn't care about it the way that I did. By the time the podcast ended, we had thoroughly lost sight of the premise, since Joel wasn't interested in it anymore. I started working on this channel to get some of the spark from researching back that I had enjoyed so much. Although, I say that now, even though my channel has changed premise as well. Unexpectedly, after 31 episodes, our producer told us that he couldn't host us anymore, which means that we had no cameras or microphones or space to record. Joel was about ready to be done with the podcast anyway, so we decided to call it quits that night. I needed to talk to him about the YouTube channel I wanted to create, because it was running on the same premise that we started for the podcast. We started it together and it was his premise for the show too, to a certain extent. He loved it and told me, everything you make is really special. I needed that. He reminded me of the time when we made Star Wars parody Twitter accounts together. He got jealous of me because he thought I made really good tweets. We had a bit of a rivalry and he ended up deleting his account because he felt like he couldn't compete with me. He also reminded me of the meme page that I made for the camp that we used to work at. It had a strong following for its niche because people really enjoyed what I made. Lastly, he reminded me of how hard I worked on the podcast. He had complete faith in me. He told me, you have to stop depending on other people. You've depended on me for the podcast and I let you down. How many times has our other friend said he was going to help you with a creative project only to flake out? You've had this creative drive in you. You've always wanted something more. You need to chase it and not depend on anyone else to validate you. I was reminded of this interaction by a random episode of Star Wars Visions. The episode opens up on a factory, but we cut to the main character Doll as she walks away from the factory. Doll's friends catch up to her and ask her what she's doing. She says that she's going to Screecher's Reach, which her friends object to, saying that it's haunted. Doll doesn't care though. She points to her amulet. Something is calling her to this place. When they talk about the ghost in the cave, Doll says that
the ghost isn't a thing you can touch. You see it in your mind.
As the group splits off into separate conversations, Doll and her other friend Bathan speak privately. Doll looks out at the stars and wishes for a better future than the one she lives in. Bathan earnestly looks at her and says,
"You've always wanted something more. And if you ever get the chance to find out what that is, take it."
This episode really embodies the creative journey for me. There's some mysterious need that drives Doll to the cave. For me, there's some strange drive to create. I can't help it. There's a monster in the cave, though. It needs to be overcome. Only the bravest souls can enter. In the show, it's an external entity, but for the creative person, it's internal. The monster you must overcome is yourself. Whenever you put yourself out into the world, it's there, waiting for you. Part 1. Blurryface. The 21 Pilots album Blurryface deals directly with the idea of a manifestation of self-hatred. The title of the album is the name of Tyler Joseph's self-hatred monster. Blurryface is the villain of the album. Throughout the album, a pitch-shifted version of Tyler Joseph's voice amplifies his greatest fears.
Yo, this song will never be on the radio.
He cares what people think, and he doesn't think that the album will get much attention because he doesn't deserve it. Tyler appears as Blurryface with black makeup that covers his neck and hands. The hands represent the things he creates, and the neck represents the things he says. I bring this up because I started noticing a trend. A few other artists seem to copy this character. Boy with Uke has a character called Toby, which seems pretty straightforwardly like a copy of Blurryface, and that's not a surprise considering that he takes pretty heavy inspiration from 21 Pilots. My sister is a pretty big fan of NF, and she recently showed me one of his videos. In his video for Hope, we see a pretty similar figure to Blurryface argue with Nate about his creative process.
We are not enough. We are not the same.
Your initial instinct here might be to be critical. A bunch of artists are copying one idea. They should be original. Why can't they have ideas of their own? Honestly, I think originality is slightly overrated. Don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. And copying someone else's work wholesale and then claiming it as your own is absolutely unacceptable. Unoriginal is the most unoriginal criticism you can make though. It feels tired, stale, and repetitive. But I'm making that criticism of other people right now. So, am I tired, stale, and repetitive? Well, I definitely feel tired right now, so the other two must be true as well. Also, I know there's more NF lore, and like it's kind of about the old self versus the new self, and his Blurryface is like an old version of himself, but we don't have time to get into that. What do I look like? A music video explain channel? Get out of here! What I mean to say is that iteration on an idea is actually a good thing. If an idea connects with you, then applying it to your own life and journey is literally the process of creation. The question of whether NF or Boy With You is copying 21 Pilots is the wrong one. I think the better question is, why did this idea resonate with at least 3 different artists? Putting yourself out there creatively is one of the most radical acts of bravery you can do. It's one of the most vulnerable things you can do. That voice of doubt in your head starts screaming at you. You're not good enough. It's not even worth it. If you want to create, then you'll find out pretty quickly how much you believe in yourself. Chances are it's not very much. All 3 of these artists have been pretty open about their struggles with mental health. Mental health issues compound this self-hatred monster and make it stronger. It's true for them, and although I've never had anything severe, it's been true for me as well. Jonah Hill made a documentary about his therapist, John Stutz, called Stutz. Dr. Stutz describes this force within all of us as part X. It's the judgmental part in us. It wants to keep you from growing. At every step in your journey, it will tell you to give up. This was actually what inspired me to make this video. Between these 3 artists and what Dr. Stutz described, I was fascinated by this force within myself and apparently within everyone else. NF has another line in his song Leave Me Alone about all of the plaques he's gotten as awards. His wife is proud and thinks that he should hang them, but he just leaves them on the ground because he struggles with his self-hatred. I never really got this line before. Those are awards. You earned them for your hard work. They seem like something to be uncritically proud of. Then something changed that made me understand. I made a video. It was literally just a random idea I had that I threw together in just a few days. For a couple of days, it got absolutely no views. My initial instinct was to delete it. Nobody cares about this stupid video. Then it got a modicum of interest with a few views, which was pretty standard for my channel at the time. I had learned from my time doing the podcast not to obsess over statistics though. I left my statistics untouched for a while. Then I checked my statistics again and I had 300 views. That scared me a bit. A few episodes of my podcast that did relatively well also got a few negative comments with them. One of them got a very negative reception because we pissed off a very large and vocal fan base.
Your podcast made this place go sad.
Thankfully though, I wasn't getting any comments on this new video yet. For a while, the video didn't grow much beyond that. Over time, it had a steady increase in viewership though. I got a few positive comments. It was nice. I was fine with my video getting a few views here and there. Suddenly though, the video skyrocketed in popularity. I was getting 1,000 views a day and about 5 to 10 subscribers a day. That wasn't so bad. I felt the need to check my statistics more often though. My channel was growing so much that I couldn't look away. That growth was pretty steady until one day it shot through the roof. With no notice as far as I could tell, it shot up to 50,000 views. Before that, people left comments expressing that they hoped the algorithm would pick the video up and that they were sad how few views the video had. I felt differently though. I felt that if I worked hard over time, I could master my craft and make something excellent. It might take a couple years, but but I knew if I worked hard, I could develop a small but loyal fan base who loved what I created. Having a subscriber count of 1,000 might not sound like much to a typical YouTube viewer who usually only watches videos with at least 10,000 views. To me, that's huge though. This isn't my first rodeo. My expectation has always been that it's hard to pick up traction online. I picked it up by accident. It's hard to feel like you've earned something when most of your views came from your lowest effort video ever. Not to mention, the voice in my head was so loud. All my self-doubt was devastating. I didn't feel like I deserved this much viewership. Imagine if you thought you were speaking to a crowd of 10 people, and then a curtain opened up and you were actually speaking to 1,000 people. Then someone in the crowd said, "Wow, I wish you were speaking to 50,000 or 100,000 people." And then their wish came true. This is the wild world I live in now. While my goal was viewership, I thought I could achieve it by working hard for years on this channel. I couldn't cope with the number 50,000. It wasn't what I expected. I thought that I had overcome the self-hatred monster by creating. I thought that creating was all it took to defeat it. I proudly preached the value of just creating things with no expectation of viewership. Creating to develop yourself as a person. My dream was that someday I might make really good content after years and years of practice, and I would have an audience I deserved then. The self-hatred monster was waiting for me though. He wasn't overcome by me getting used to the creation process. He just learned to hide better. He was waiting for his chance to strike. My life goal is to make something truly beautiful. When I see something excellent, it makes me jealous. I told myself that I would never make something that good in my lifetime. I will never add that much value to the world. Now I'm trying though. I'm not there yet, and I may never get there, but I can't give up on my desire to do that. My soul won't rest if I don't try. If I'm going to do that, then I need to kill my own blurry face. The first step in killing Blurryface is actually quite easy. So in Premiere Pro, you just have to click on the effect and delete it. I don't know why you put that effect on in the first place. Seth Godin describes the self-hatred monster as your lizard brain.
The idea of the lizard brain is this. It is hungry, it is scared, it is selfish, and it is horny. That's its job.
As more developed creatures, humans have the limbic system, which is responsible for sharing, being loyal, and connecting with others. The self-hatred monster is a manifestation of fear. It's your survival instinct. It's safer not to put yourself out there. Nobody can write a hate comment if you don't make a YouTube video. Nobody can make fun of your art if you don't make it. It's safer. Communal cooperation is how we survive, and it makes it risky to do something that others might not approve of.
The lizard brain says, I need to speak up now because they're going to make fun of you.
We have a more important goal though. We're aiming at something higher than survival. CJ the X describes this as a dichotomy between love and fear. You have two instincts to create. One is love, which pushes us to create in order to serve the higher good. Then there's fear, which is a motivation to create, but the more we feed it, the more miserable it makes us and the more powerful it gets. We create hoping to placate our fears. CJ comes quite harshly down on fear as a motive to create.
Does it ruin the whole gig for you if you aren't special and you never will be?
Everyone has their altruistic motive as well as their secret motive that they're not good enough. CJ argues that you should choose love.
Figure out your main character syndrome reason, then decide your real reason.
So that's it. You can address the self-hatred monster for what it is. A coward. You are better than the self-hatred monster. You're more evolved. You don't need it. Are you a human or an animal? I haven't really kept up with the critical reception of NF's career, but I know that early on he was criticized for how much brag rapping he did. It makes sense that he would do a lot of brag rapping though. If fear is what he struggles with, then wouldn't it make sense for him to hype himself up in order to overcome that fear? Celeste probably has one of my favorite examples of defeating fear. In Celeste, you play as Madeline, who wants to climb a mountain. Madeline? Is it Madeline or Madeline? Madeline? Oh, by the way, major spoilers for Celeste. If you don't want the game to be spoiled, then now is your time to leave. It's a really good game, I promise. It'll be worth it. Celeste starts out as a pretty standard story-like platformer, but then the main character Madeline discovers this mirror. Based on what this video is about, I bet you can probably figure out what this mirror creates. If you guessed a manifestation of her self-hatred, then you are officially the smartest person in the room. Unless there's other people in the room, then I'm not so sure. So anyway, this manifestation of Madeline's misgivings about the measure of her value sabotages her at every turn. The nickname for this manifestation is Badeline, which does sound a little funny to say out loud. Badeline is verbally abusive and cruel. She stands against everything that Madeline is trying to do. Finally, Madeline confronts Badeline after this journey of sabotage. She comes to understand that if she's going to continue, then she needs to leave this part of herself behind. The extra baggage won't do on this journey to self-discovery. By setting that part of herself free, they can both be happier. It's such a beautiful and brave moment in the game. Madeline's attempt to defeat the dark version of herself fails. She can't leave that version of herself behind, and when she rejects it, it becomes more powerful. "You're not above me," it powerfully proclaims, "and you can't climb this mountain." Badeline sends Madeline careening to the bottom of the mountain, lower even than where she started from. Only at rock bottom she realizes this dark manifestation is part of her. She will always have that in her. Then she encounters an old lady. Throughout the journey, the old lady has tormented Madeline, but this time she gives some advice that actually helps. Talk to this other version of herself. Figure out why she's so scared. Ask her. Madeline finds the dark version of herself again. She acknowledges it was a mistake to let that part of herself go. "I know you're scared. Look, we're at rock bottom. There's no point in fighting. Let's climb out of here. Together." Madeline resists. "I did you a favor. You aren't a mountain climber. I'm just trying to help you." Madeline confronts this darkness and wins this time. "Fine, you win. I guess you don't need me after all." "That's not what I said. I need your help more than ever. Please, let's work together. It's okay to be scared." Madeline embraces this dark version of herself and integrates her into herself. Through this union, Madeline becomes more capable than she ever was before. In-game, that means you get an extra jump, essentially. This idea of a manifestation of self-hatred comes, as far as I can tell, from Carl Jung. Jung called it the shadow self, a collection of everything inside of you that you try to hide from the world in order to become a more civilized human being. The shadow self doesn't go away though, it just remains hidden. In crisis, your mask slips and you become everything you hate. It's the secret that you're so desperately trying to keep. The only way to overcome the shadow is not to reject it, but to integrate it into your life.
The less you acknowledge it, the more it will seep into what you do.
The shadow is part of you, and you can't overcome it by hiding it. You overcome it by exposing it to the light. The shadow self is only able to be dealt with through integration. That's why Tyler Joseph created the Blurryface character. He wanted to give it a seat at the table in his mind. Stutz also covers the idea of the shadow. For Jonah Hill, the shadow is represented by himself at 14 years old. Jonah worked really hard to become successful. He got in shape and by all measures lived a successful life. Even in spite of this though, he couldn't escape this self-image. The key for Jonah was not only to accept this version of himself, but to love it. For a moment, I would like to concede that I'm talking about two different forces inside of us. These are what Stutz refers to as Part X and the Shadow. Blurryface and its counterparts represent both the force that suppresses our spirit and the spirit which we try to suppress. I don't think there's a clean breakdown between the two because our minds are a complicated mess. The self-hatred monster is ultimately a force of spirit suppression that will use every tool in its arsenal to achieve its goal. It brings our insecurities to the forefront of our mind while demanding that we hide from them. For me, my greatest fear is that I'm atrociously cringy. I worry that everyone is playing nice with me, but really, I'm an embarrassment. Maybe I can get people to laugh at me, but nobody takes me seriously. I'm like Kevin from The Office or Gary from Parks and Rec, except less likable.
I do the numbers.
In order to confront that, I need to accept that it might be true. I might be cringy as all get out, the worst of the worst. I could become a spectacle of disaster, but it seems like some people like my work. Shouldn't that count for something? I'm genuinely trying to put out good into the world. I want to be a force for positivity. That's why I make these videos. To talk about what I'm dealing with or to show what I enjoy. If that isn't a thing worth pursuing, then I don't know if anything is. I'm still figuring out this whole integration of the shadow thing. I still suffer from anxiety with putting my stuff out into the world. The point isn't to become perfect at self-acceptance because that will never happen. The point is to get better and aim every day at something that I'm still working to achieve. If I don't, it'll get worse. If I let my insecurities hide in the dark, they'll show up again, but only when I'm most vulnerable. In some ways, I'm hesitant to release this video because I haven't truly learned this lesson yet. I'm still working on internalizing it. That's the tricky thing though. The best way to learn this lesson is to release this video, so I have no choice. When I had no viewers, I proudly preached that these videos shaped me. That hasn't changed even as I start to develop a tiny audience. The only difference now is that somebody gets to decide whether these videos are truly helpful to them. They don't get to decide whether I'm valuable though. I'm terrified that if I make something bad, that means that I'm bad. I considered doing another Don't Hug Me I'm Scared video because I know it would get tons of views. I also promised that I would do something, but I'm terrified that my offering wouldn't be good enough. If I get tons of views, then I wouldn't deserve them, but I can't kill the part of me that's cringe. So that means that I must kill the part of me that cringes. While we're on the subject of insecurities, I hate writing conclusions. I already said most of what I want to say. Why can't you make the conclusion? For years I got marked down on my essays in school simply because I refused to write conclusions. I also hate editing the conclusions of my videos. I always feel like I should be doing more, but it never feels right to add a bunch of edits. We all have weaknesses, and this is my burden to bear. It's kind of weird making this video because I'm opening myself up to a lot of criticism about who I am. Maybe I have thin skin. Maybe it's terrifying making content for an audience that you have no read on. Whatever the case, I have to face my fears head on. If I want to serve something greater than myself, then I have to expose myself to that level of vulnerability. Everything in myself that I fear being made fun of is still part of me. If I hate that part of me, then how can anyone else accept it? All I can do is put myself out there. And if other people connect with it, that's their own prerogative. I can't worry about what I deserve. I will probably never be free from my own blurry face. It will always be a battle. If I accept that part of myself though, I can do this. I can create beautiful things. Defeating self-hatred isn't just about the creation process. If you're struggling to put yourself out there in a new social environment or ask someone out, you need to confront the self-hatred monster. It's only right that you give yourself a fair shot. You're special, but you're not special. Same with me. Everyone has something unique to bring to the table. That makes us all the same. Maybe what I make is bad. That's okay, because I feel very strongly that to create something bad is better than to create nothing at all if you feel called to do so. I can do my best, but the rest is out of my hands. If I do that, then there's nothing left to prove. The fact that this video is out means I've won for today. My self-doubt is strong, but I'm stronger. More than that, if I can accept it and integrate it into my life, I can combine that strength with my own. I can work with it, not against it.